In a psychiatric clinic, a nurse enters a dark room and starts taking pictures of the secrets there. Suddenly a shadow moves behind her and a mysterious person stabs her eye with a syringe. Then the person injects the green liquid into the nurse, killing her and making her eyes change color. Then her body is dragged away. Sometime later, the clinic's Dr. Sebastian has a meeting with the institute's director because his research hasn't seen any progress. Sebastian swears he's almost finished, but the director tells him to bring results soon or he'll lose his funds. Later that day, Kathy arrives at the clinic for a job interview. The very strict matron Cassidy isn't impressed by her resume and Sebastian asks some questions to check her knowledge. After Kathy answers correctly and promises she would never tell the doctor how to do his job, she gets hired. Then Kathy is given a uniform and fellow nurse Paula tells her that the previous nurse didn't last long. Paula gives Kathy a tour of the place and reveals that Cassidy is Sebastian's daughter. She used to be married, but her husband self-deleted. She also teaches Kathy that Sebastian's laboratory is off limits. Next, Kathy is taken to the second floor with all the comatose patients, who never get any visitors. Kathy notices they're very sick looking and is startled when a patient suddenly jerks, but it's just an involuntary muscle reaction. After Paula is called to Cassidy's office, Kathy wanders alone and finds a comatose patient alone in room 15. Unlike the others, he looks very healthy and his eyes are open. When Paula returns, she explains his name is Patrick and that he looks better because he's Sebastian's special project. Kathy leans in to say hello and Patrick spits at her, but once again Paula explains it's an involuntary reaction. Later Kathy hears a strange noise and notices a man walk by, so she rushes to stop him. When he turns around, he reveals a very scarred face. Paula comes by and tells Kathy to let him go, explaining that's Mr. Fraser and he's allowed to wander around. He survived an electrical explosion and Sebastian brought him back from his coma. Paula takes Kathy to Fraser's room to show the man's collection of clocks, which made the strange alarm noise Kathy heard. Every day at 7 p.m., Fraser operates a lighthouse nearby, which was Sebastian's idea to help the man keep focus. When Kathy goes home, she gets a call from her ex and ignores it. Suddenly she's startled by someone at the door, but it's just Paula picking her up to go drinking. At the bar, they meet a psychiatrist called Brian, who has a radio show. Kathy quickly gets interested in him. The next day, one of the comatose patients dies and Kathy must take him to the morgue, so she uses the elevator. To her shock, the patient starts breathing and suddenly he reaches out to choke her. As Kathy struggles to get free, she accidentally hits the elevator button and makes it stop. With some difficulty, she manages to reach the button and get the elevator going again before finally removing the hand from her neck. When they make it to the morgue, she tells Sebastian that the patient is alive and the doctor isn't surprised. He just tells her to send him back and meet him in room 15. Before entering the room, Sebastian explains the details of his experiment, reminding Kathy she must obey his instructions no matter what happens. Then Sebastian gives Patrick an injection and keeps poking his body to stimulate brain activity, but nothing happens. When he's done, he tells Kathy to clean up. While she works, Kathy talks to Patrick out of habit, and Sebastian scolds her for it. Sometime later, Kathy brings a plant to brighten Patrick's room and Paula tells her it's pointless because plants never last in the clinic. However, as days pass, the plant blooms beautifully. One day while they're changing Patrick's sheets, Paula insists Kathy should go on a date with Brian and the bed's railing almost catches her fingers, but they blame it on the bed being broken. Kathy also gets another call from the ex, but she ignores it when she hears Patrick spit. She decides trying to talk to him only to be heard by Cassidy, who scolds her for it. Her hands shake as she speaks and she ends up throwing the things off the tray she's holding. During the weekend, Kathy bumps into Brian at a museum. She asks his professional opinion on the awareness of comatose patients, but Brian thinks that involuntary twitches are meaningless. While he talks, he gets a call from an unknown number but doesn't get it on time. Then Brian invites Kathy to grab a coffee and when she says yes, Brian spits at her. A disgusted Kathy leaves while Brian looks confused about what happened. A few days later while Fraser's clocks are ringing, Kathy walks by and notices a patient sitting up. However, when she enters the room to check, the patient is lying down normally. As the light flickers, Kathy takes a closer look only to be startled by an apparition behind her and she drops her tray. She finds nothing behind her and proceeds to pick up the tray, only to see the reflection of the apparition on it. But when she turns around there's nothing again. The next time she sees a weird reflection, it's just Fraser wandering around. In the evening, Brian visits Kathy at her home and apologizes for what he did, confessing he doesn't remember the moment. They end up having a lovely dinner together only to be interrupted by the arrival of Kathy's ex-Ed. He refuses to leave when Kathy asks him to, but he has no choice when Brian comes to her defense. Too upset to continue the date, Kathy asks Brian to leave too and Brian insists on staying to protect her. Suddenly his hand starts shaking and the glass he's holding explodes, making his hand bleed. After Kathy takes Brian to the hospital, she returns to the car and her hand is jolted by the door. Later that night, Brian comes back to Kathy's home and they end up getting dirty. In the middle of their passion, Kathy is shocked to see Brian transform into Patrick, who starts rotting. Kathy screams and punches him in the stomach before she finally wakes up. Brian is sleeping beside her, but when he turns around he's Patrick again, only for Kathy to realize this is also a dream and she's actually alone. The next day Kathy goes to work and checks on Patrick. When she remembers her dream, the glass on the window breaks, hurting the plant. The next time Sebastian runs some tests on Patrick, he burns his hand to force a reaction, but again nothing happens. When Kathy comes to clean him up, Patrick spits at her and she notices he's crying. She wonders if he can feel pain and Patrick spits again, making her realize he's communicating. Spitting once is yes, twice is no. Kathy starts asking questions and learns that Patrick can hear her. He can also feel her hand touching his body. As Kathy touches different body parts to test how much Patrick can feel, she looks at his groin and gets ready for a dirty touch, only for Cassidy to catch her red-handed. Kathy tries to explain Patrick is communicating, but Cassidy dismisses her claim and tells her to stop behaving like this, mentioning all their patients would be better off dead. At that moment Sebastian arrives and asks Kathy to show him her discovery, but when Kathy tries to communicate with Patrick again, there's no reaction. Disappointed, Sebastian takes a toad from the office, kills it with a knife to the brain, and then makes it move by electrocuting it. This is supposed to teach Kathy that involuntary muscle reactions don't mean anything. In the evening, Cassidy tries entering Patrick's room, but his eyes suddenly change and the door slams on its own. Patrick has psychic powers, which he uses on the computer in the room to stalk Kathy on social media. The next day, Sebastian runs the tests on Patrick again and afterward he asks Kathy to transcribe the notes he recorded. Once Kathy is alone, she asks Patrick why he didn't react in front of Sebastian and the word secret appears 3 times. At that moment Paula comes to ask Kathy for help and the words disappear. The next time Sebastian does his tests on Patrick, he uses a device to electrocute him in the head. Kathy immediately protests because she sees it as inhumane, but Sebastian reminds her to stay in her place because he's the boss. In the end this method doesn't get a reaction from Patrick either. Sometime later, Kathy visits Ed and they agree to try a relationship again. At the clinic, Patrick uses his power to search Ed's number on the internet and calls him. As soon as Ed sees the words unknown number on the screen, Patrick takes control of his mind and forces Ed to burn his hands on the stove. Kathy helps him snap out of it and takes him to the hospital, where the doctor informs her that Ed's hands have no nerves left. Later at work, Kathy visits Patrick and he starts communicating by typing on the computer. He assures her he can still hear her, but he refuses to share his secret with Sebastian. When Kathy goes home, she tries researching psychic powers, but the internet says it isn't real. She decides to return to the clinic and talk to Patrick, who explains he's always been awake. He only shows his powers to her because she's shown him understanding and kindness. Paul finds her in the room, however the words disappear from the screen before she can see them. The next day Kathy visits Ed at the hospital and he explains he remembers nothing of the incident, which the doctors blame on some underlying condition. In the afternoon, Sebastian electrocutes Patrick again. After he's gone, Kathy tells Patrick that she wants to help him, but he says he doesn't need help and he needs the doctor. Afterward Kathy tells Sebastian that at this rate Patrick will die, but he ignores her. In the evening, Kathy researches Patrick's accident but there are no results online. She tells Brian about Sebastian's unethical procedures and he agrees to help by using his reporter resources. The next day Patrick tells Kathy he isn't hiding, he's actually watching Kathy to learn more about her and protect her. Moments later, Sebastian scolds Kathy for spreading bad rumors about him since Brian has been calling him with invasive questions. A few days later, Kathy is chatting with Patrick when Fraser turns on the lighthouse, causing Patrick's connection to shut down for a few seconds. When he's back, he insists he doesn't need help and opens the door for Kathy to leave. Meanwhile Sebastian gets a voicemail from the director telling him the board has called for an emergency meeting because of the bad rumors, so Sebastian needs to bring results immediately or the clinic will be shut down. At the same time, Brian is driving outside town and tries to call Kathy. Suddenly his phone starts heating up and he drops it, only for the device to melt the passenger seat. Then the car starts going faster on its own and Brian can't take control of it. After the car goes through a fence, it stops at the edge of a cliff, so Brian tries to get his seatbelt off to leave. However, the seatbelt keeps jolting him, and then it tightens up around his body to keep him in place. Brian screams as the car moves again and falls off the cliff. The next day Kathy snaps when she sees Sebastian electrocuting Patrick again and unplugs the shock machine, so Sebastian orders her to leave using rude words. Then he tells Patrick he's getting closer to his goal and he'll make him regret hiding. Eventually, Sebastian's experiment causes Patrick to flatline, so Paula rushes in to do CPR while Kathy gives him an adrenaline shot. Patrick is revived, however Cassidy kicks both nurses out of the room. Then Cassidy tells her father that Sebastian was sent to punish them, but Sebastian says he's actually their legacy and refuses to stop. Meanwhile Kathy finds Fraser coughing and having trouble breathing. She tries to open his mouth but he keeps biting her, so she uses a stick instead. Fraser calms down and looks at the radio, which changes channels on its own and stops at a broadcast announcing Brian's death. Furious, Kathy runs to accuse Sebastian of killing Brian, so Sebastian fires her. Kathy runs out and gets in her car, where she's startled to see Fraser on the mirror. He tells her that if she leaves it'll be her fault, yet Kathy leaves anyway. In the clinic, Cassidy grabs a special syringe, revealing she was the one who killed the last nurse. Later she visits Kathy and tells her to never come back to the clinic because her father is dangerous. Before leaving, she gives Kathy a folder with Patrick's records. Kathy reads it all and learns that Patrick had an obsessive relationship with his mother. He also killed 2 people and tried to self-delete. Back to Cassidy, she returns to the clinic and makes up a story about an emergency patient to get Sebastian and Paula to leave. Then she goes to room 15 and tries stabbing Patrick with scissors, but Patrick uses his power to make her drop them. At home, Kathy is bathing when she puts all the clues together, finally realizing Patrick has been controlling the men in her life and causing all the strange incidents. She tries calling Ed to warn him but gets voicemail, so she just tells him to run. Then she looks in the mirror and sees the words "You are mine" appear. Kathy shouts that she'll never be Patrick's and calls him a pathetic child, causing the words to disappear and the mirror to explode, pushing Kathy back. The incident is recorded by the voicemail and Ed hears it all, but when he tries to call her she won't answer. She's too busy removing all the glass shards from her bleeding body. Once she's recovered, she rushes to her car and sees Patrick in the mirror, but she drives off anyway. In the clinic, Cassidy goes to the lab to try to shut the power down, intending to end Patrick's life support. Patrick starts throwing objects at her with his powers and after she dodges them, a bunch of glass shards attack her. They don't do much damage and Cassidy keeps going, so Patrick throws a bunch of scalpels at her back and hits her with the door. This still not enough to stop her and Cassidy reaches the power grid, only for Patrick to use it to electrocute her. As Cassidy slowly dies, Patrick has a flashback. He remembers spying on his mother and her boyfriend doing the naughty, so his mother slapped him for it and called him a perv. She even showed him her chest and taunted him with it before slamming the door. At that moment Sebastian comes back and enters his lab, only for Patrick to close and lock the door. Then Ed arrives and is welcomed by Paula, whose robotic movements and lack of speech show she's being controlled by Patrick. She guides Ed to another room and opens the big freezer, where she pushes Ed in and locks him up. Soon Kathy also arrives and the door electrocutes her when she touches it, pushing her back. She tries again and comes inside, finding Paula wandering around. Kathy tries following her and ends up at the main ward, where she hears a patient whispering that Patrick wants her to finish touching him. The patient headbutts her when he suddenly sits up, causing her to fall. Paula watches her for a second before she leaves, and when Kathy stands up, all the patients sit up to repeat that Patrick wants to get dirty with her. Kathy yells at them to shut up and runs after Paula, who pushes her back with a wave of telekinesis. Then the elevator opens and Paula stands on the edge, so Kathy begs Patrick to let her go. Paula wakes up and falls to the bottom, but she survives with only broken bones. Unfortunately Patrick releases the elevator and crushes her to death. A devastated Kathy runs to room 15 but can't open the door. At that moment she gets a text message from Patrick saying "I love you," but she rejects him and wonders if this is the same love he had for his mother. Patrick has another flashback, revealing he was so angry with his mom that he electrocuted her and her boyfriend while they were doing the dirty in the tub by throwing a toaster in the water. In the present, Patrick tells Kathy that he hit Ed and invites her to play hide and seek. Kathy desperately searches for Ed and Patrick texts her words like cold and warm to guide her to the right spot. Eventually Kathy reaches the lab, where she's horrified to find mutilated bodies and a dead Cassidy. Sebastian is also there eating a raw toad, saying Patrick made him do it. At that moment Patrick opens the door and Sebastian escapes, but the door closes again before Kathy can leave. Sebastian tries to give Patrick a deadly injection, but Patrick makes him drop the syringe. Then Sebastian tries grabbing the electroshock machine, only for it to explode on his face before Patrick pushes him out of the room and closes the door. Sebastian hits a wall before Patrick puts headphones in his ears, playing Sebastian's favorite music before putting the electroshock device in his hands to start frying his brain. Fraser appears to help, but before he can unplug the machine, he hears the clocks and runs to turn on the lighthouse, leaving Sebastian to die. The lab finally opens and Kathy runs out to keep searching for Ed, finally finding him in the freezer. Kathy can't open the door and watches how a dead nurse appears behind Ed to start choking him. Patrick texts Kathy telling her to join him if she wants to save Ed. Kathy rushes to room 15 and Patrick gives her Sebastian's syringe, asking her again to join him. Hearing the clocks reminds her that the lighthouse turns Patrick's powers off for a few seconds, so Kathy pretends she'll join him and kisses him. As Patrick remembers finishing his mother into the tub, the lighthouse is turned on and Kathy stabs him with a needle. The syringe explodes and a powerful energy pushes Kathy back as it makes a bunch of objects float. Then the energy returns to Patrick's body and kills him, causing the dead nurse to fall and let go of Ed, who rushes to reunite with Kathy. A flashback reveals Patrick cried after killing his mom and the guilt made him touch the toaster to self-delete. In the present, Patrick's body suddenly flies through the window and lands on a fence spike, causing him to finally close his eyes. Sometime later, Kathy starts working at a new clinic, where she's experimenting on the bodies of Patrick, Cassidy, and Sebastian. When the electrocution begins, she wakes up at home with Ed, only for the window to close on its own.